Sahana Vavadu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhidamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us meditate on the Supreme Reality present in all of us. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. So today's topic is going beyond anxiety and fear. Now this topic is a bit psychological with a strong undertones of modern psychiatry and psychological problems, because anxiety is a very common problem, and anxiety is related to fear. Maybe the modern psychiatry only analyzes these problems and helps us to postpone these problems, not to solve it once for all. Reduce the intensity, reduce its impact on our daily activities, but may not necessarily solve the problem once for all. Because we study the mind and we cannot really find a solution to the problems of the mind at a mental level. We should go beyond mind. We should understand what lies beyond the mind to understand the problems of mind. And I frequently used to mention again and again, one very serious problem and one important cause of many of these problems in our times is what I would call the tyranny of pragmatism. We want to judge everything, not only our actions, but even ideas, on the basis of their immediate, tangible, enjoyable results in our life. And very frequently we measure these enjoyments in dollars and cents. That's a very, very cutthroat form of pragmatism, maybe much more rigid and in a way much more inhuman than the utilitarian philosophy of J.S. Mill or Bentham, where they judged the value of anything in this world on the basis of the maximum amount of pressure it brings to our life. Maximum amount of pressure to the maximum number of people. That should be the criterion for judging anything from a purely utilitarian point of view. And spirituality is just the opposite of utilitarianism. Spirituality begins where utilitarian, pragmatic approach to life comes to an end. We can never be spiritual without moving away from pragmatism and utilitarianism. It doesn't mean that we should run away from the world of realities. We must completely ignore the practical, the pragmatic things of life and take refuge in some utopian ideas. That's not the meaning. To be very frank, to be obsessed with an idealism, is in a way as suicidal as to be obsessed with pragmatism. If you are purely idealistic without any connection to the real world in which we live, then we may not be able to solve the problems that confront us in our everyday life. And then it comes to an end. You can imagine what happened to Robert Owen, Freud, and some of the early utopian socialists who were the forerunners of Marx. That led to the emergence of Marxian utilitarianism. So Robert Owen thought, for example, a day will come when the rich people will willingly distribute their wealth among the poor people. That is what he thought. So they call it utopian socialism, purely utopian. It is a kind of unrealistic idealism, which proved to be wrong. So in his reaction, the pendulum swung in the other direction, and that led him to the emergence of materialistic ultra-pragmatism in the form of Marxian pragmatism. That's what happened in the 19th century. The emergence of utopian, ultra-idealistic socialism under Saint Simon in England, France, Freud, and both of them Frenchmen, and Robert Owen in England. They were the men who popularized this ultra-idealistic philosophy, kind of pragmatic humanism, which came to be known as utopian socialism, which was the derogatory term which Marx used in his own books against the views of utopia. Robert Owen, who believed that a day will come when the rich people will distribute their wealth willingly among the poor people. So there will be a wonderful world in this world. The whole society will be liberated from the problems of wars. It's proved to be wrong. So as a reaction to this, Marx and Engels came and they pushed the pendulum to the other extreme, and they came forward with an idea that this is not going to happen, this should be done, this should be enforced upon society, if necessary, through violence. You can imagine the results, the consequences that we are still reaping now. So there is as much evil in taking refuge in ultra-idealism as being obsessed with ultra-pragmatism. But being obsessed with pragmatism is the problem of our times. I mean, we judge everything, even human values, even spiritual values, in terms of dollars and cents, or in terms of tangible, visible, enjoyable results that we can have, that may help us to live a better world, a more comfortable life in this world, which completely ignores some of the basic elements of human nature. Because primarily it is based on the obsession with success. We must always succeed in everything. Purely empirical philosophy. You must succeed. Can we always succeed in everything that we undertake? Is it really possible to be always successful in everything? The world itself is changeable. Everything in this empirical world is changeable. In that case, can we always have success without a failure? Can we have can you have a coin with only one side, not the others without another side? So, here we can see the need for going beyond the empirical, going beyond the pragmatic, going beyond the results or the obsession with success in this world. Because obsession with success, obsession with pragmatic benefits as criteria for all our actions and ideas that we uphold, as one danger, it secularizes even the spiritual. Even spiritual things, spiritual actions and spiritual values will be judged by the measure of secular values. There's a secularization of the spiritual that will happen if you get obsessed with the pragmatic things, practicality. Our real goal, our solution, our remedy to the problems of anxiety and fear is possible only through spiritualization of the secular. Giving a spiritual orientation, a spiritual direction to our normal activities. I mean, by linking the secular with the spiritual, by trying to spiritualize our whole life through spiritualization of the secular is the only remedy. But pragmatism pushes towards secularization of the spiritual. And in its straying, obsession with science, obsession with technology, which completely kills the many of the creative instincts and skills in human beings. There is one article published not long back that's very informative, very educative. It is focused on the problems of educational campuses in the United States. So the burden of the article was this. Right now, our education system is extremely technology-oriented, result-oriented, oriented towards tangible, enjoyable, immediate results, which again should come in the form of dollars. So students do not get a chance to enrich their skills, some of their higher skills, mysticism, poetry, music, art, paintings, history, philosophy, metaphysics, higher things. On the other hand, what immediate material, worldly benefits we can produce, we can create by sitting in front of a machine, by pressing a few buttons, where there is no human emotion involved. So if you get obsessed with a machine, see there is a verse in Sanskrit, yad bhavayati tad bhavati. Is a simple statement. God means what you meditate upon, what you interact with, what you get obsessed with, that you become. This is the central theme. It is taken from a spiritual life. See, you inherit, you develop some of the essential characteristics of the God idea that you worship. See, if you look upon God as a compassionate, as a omnipresent, immanent, transcendental reality that is present everywhere, that is no partiality, that is not on one side of the humanity, no, against the other, no. It is universal. Then you also tend to become universal. You also become compassionate. You also become broad-minded. So if you go on meditating on an idea of God who is universal, who is the embodiment of all the broad universal ideas, then you feel, without your being aware of it, we also develop some of those great qualities. Now, coming to this, what we meditate upon, what you interact with, that you become. So, if students, for example, in the universities and schools, do not get a chance to enrich some of the natural, higher human emotional skills, the feelings, if they don't get a chance to refine and educate their skills and the emotions, not only the intellectual thought currents, not only technical skills, but even the emotions, then what happens, they don't have an avenue, they don't have a proper channel for directing their emotions and feelings. So that may be one possible reason why sometimes, suddenly some students, who for no other reason, not due to any fanaticism or anything, going wrong mentally and commits violence or actions of violence, you find. Because on the other hand, if you teach them poetry or mysticism, I'm sure if they study Emerson, they won't do that. If they study Whitman or Thoreau, they won't do that. If they study Aristotle, Newton, even Newton agrees, scientists won't do that. But what happens? All those skills, all those higher emotions and feelings remain deadened. They are killed. On the other hand, only their physical skills, some of the physical skills only get refinement, and therefore either they become monsters or morons or machines. One of the three options. You can become a monster, you can become a machine, no feeling, no emotions, or you can become a moron. So there is an interesting verse in Sanskrit. Yauvanam dhana sampatti prabhutvam madamevacha ekaikamivi anarthaya kimu yatra chadurtham. Is a famous verse, you may have heard of it, Kalidasa, the greatest poet, would say the Shakespeare of India. What Shakespeare is to English literary tradition, Kalidasa is to. He was a great spiritual teacher also, Kalidasa. So he says, the 5 characteristics are outlined here. Yauvana means youth, energy. Dhana sampatti means a lot of money, wealth, a huge bank balance. And then prabhutvam, you have so many followers. You are a big man in society, you are a big celebrity. And a lot of pride and ego. These are 4 wonderful qualities. Now, suppose a person has any of these 4, any one of these 4, without a spiritual direction, it will lead to his downfall. That's the meaning. So youth, lot of energy, lot of enthusiasm, but no direction, purely obsessed with ultra-pragmatism, anxiety, neurosis, all these problems will be the result. Dhana sampatti, lot of money, but have no idea how to spend this money for his good and also for others' good. Prabhutvam, a big man with a lot of followers. But she doesn't know how to make use of this great influence on a large number of people. And pride, false pride. Pride can become a creative, positive element. Self-confidence, the ability to withstand obstacles, the ability to stick to higher spiritual ideas. In fact, Bhagavad Gita outlines creative, positive pride as a necessary tool, instrument for devotees of God. So, santushta sadadam yogi yatatma dridhanishchaya. Dridhanishchaya means a strong iron will, a strong sense of self-confidence. You find all the great spiritual teachers and all the great men and women who made great contributions to anything worthwhile, any contribution to the totality of human civilization, either in science, in mysticism, in philosophy, or even in philanthropical activities. That tremendous self-confidence, which was given a positive direction. So that helped them to withstand great obstacles, which are invariable in any noble undertaking. So, pride is very good, but pride can become a very negative, self-negating, a self-destructive emotion. Suppose a person has got these four characteristics. Youth, yavvanam dhana sambatti means lot of wealth. Prabhutva means you are leader of a big group, and lot of false pride. Even one of these is enough to lead to one's downfall. Suppose all these combined together in a single human being, you can imagine the result. They are very wonderful verse. Now, in this context, to make these ideas more clear, to give them a concrete form and concrete shape, I'm going to give you the example of the greatest philosopher, the greatest author of Vedanta tradition. His name was Vyasa. Now, Vyasa was a superman in many ways. I told you that Bhagavad Gita is a universal classic. It contains 700 verses. And it is just a small fraction of a much bigger work called Mahabharata, which in its shortest version has more than 100,000 verses. In its larger version, it has 145,000 verses. And he also wrote, arguably, the most celebrated devotional classic of Vedantic tradition. And he was the one who classified and edited the whole Vedic literature into 4 groups, Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvaveda, which he taught, each of which he taught one of his 4 disciples. He was also a great lawgiver, Vyasa Smriti. In a way, he was a big man, the greatest author, and during his time, the greatest philosopher of his times. And his life was itself a demonstration of the highest values, what we call values, dharma, ethical values. He was an ideal teacher, he was an ideal philosopher, an ideal author. And then he had wonderful disciples. So you naturally imagine such a person will be very happy. But he was not very happy. If such a person becomes unhappy, it shows 2 factors. One, his greatness. If you have got everything going in favor of you, you have no problem. Money, wealth, you lead a good life. You achieve great things, you accomplish great things. You the greatest author in this world. And still you are unhappy. What does it mean? Either it's a psychological problem, psychiatric problem, or it's a spiritual problem. If it were a spiritual problem, it would make you a great teacher, Buddha. That's what happened to Buddha. Buddha was born in a palace. He was a prince. He was brought up in the world of luxuries. He didn't know what it meant to be poor, to be sick, to be old, to be weak, or to have any problem. And he was unhappy. He became unhappy when he saw 4 symbols of sickness, death, old age, and of course their opposite, serenity. That made him unhappy. Now if you have all problems solved, empirical problems, secular problems. You lead a good life. Still, if you feel unhappy, you should remember you are in distinguished company, in the company of Buddha and others. In fact, one should learn to be restless, one should learn to worry when everything is going on fine. In fact, that is the real greatness. It means it is a prelude, it is an opening door leading to a higher spiritual greatness. That's why, only noble soul, noble person will have a sense of incompleteness, even when he has no problem from a worldly point of view. That was the case with Vyasa. So I shall take up some of these verses because it will be very interesting. You can get the translations also from books. So this man, this great sage, the greatest author, the ancient wise man, he was sitting on the banks of river, Saraswati, an ancient river. So the classical work says, Para avaraknya sarishi kalena avyaktaram khasa yugadharma vitikaram praptam bhuvi yuge yuge. Now what was his thoughts? Just imagine what was he talking about. He had achieved everything. He was himself adored as a great sage. But he was sitting on the bank of a river. He was contemplating. See, almost like Buddha. People are losing faith in higher spiritual values. So it is called Tripai. He is called Paravaraknya, means the one who can see the past, present and future. A great spiritual person, any mystic, can see time without the dividing line between past and present and the dividing line between the present and future. He can see as a single dimension. So this sage was such a person. He was sitting alone in a contemplative mood on the banks of the river, thinking about his times. Today we often imagine, today, these days, things are going bad, people are losing faith. 7,000 years back also, great men thought like that. So what does it mean? So practically the totality of good and bad values, goodness and badness rather, they remain the same. Only they change their names and forms and shapes. They manifest in so many different ways in different ages. So the Vyasa was also worrying about the present conditions as we worry about our conditions today. So he says, people are losing faith in everything. Bhautiganam cha bhavanam shakti hrasam cha tatkrudam asuddhadhanan nissattvan durmedhan hrisidayusha. So he was thinking about the destiny of human race. The beginning of a new age, Kali Yuga as he called. So what is going to happen to the human race? They are not following higher values. Now here, he also thought, well, why is it that I feel anxious? I feel a kind of inner fear about my own future, about the future of the world. If I have done everything fine, I have nothing to complain about. I have fully achieved everything. Even in a spiritual sense, he had done great things for the benefit of the world. Still he was unhappy. So there should be something wrong with me, something that I have omitted, which I should rectify. That is the conclusion he reached. He had taught the four Vedas. He had taught many of his disciples the highest spiritual practice. Everything he had done. He had written the Mahabharata. In spite of all this, he felt unhappy. So when these thoughts were crossing his mind, another sage appeared there. So there is a dialogue between them. That's an interesting subject. The burden of the dialogue is this. I will come to the subject later. It is very, very important. Vyasa, the great author, he had dealt with dharma. Now, dharma means, let us say, the highest virtue. The highest, ethical, moral philosophy that all people should follow. He emphasized this dharma aspect in Mahabharata. It's a huge work. Now, what is dharma? What is ethical and moral for me may not be the same for you. Ethics and morality have got two dimensions, the universal and the non-universal. Ethics at the individual level may be different, may vary from culture to culture. Ethics even at the national level may vary from culture to culture, nation to nation. There is no universal ethics for nations, for individuals, for families and cultures. But there is a universal ethics that is applicable to the entire human race. He dealt only with the ethics related to life in this world. See, for example, how to live a law-abiding life, how to stick to some great ethical principles. That's enough. But then, in the subsequent commentaries, there is an idea mentioned. Ethics is not enough for you to get peace of mind. It is certainly a great thing to become established in ethics and morality. That's a beginning, the essential first step, the most indispensable, the most essential path that leads to a higher spiritual life. But it is only the noblest, the most essential means, it is not the goal. Well, let us say for an example, in our life, you come across many people who do a lot of good things to others and who are very much established, fully follow the principles of ethics in all his aspects, but without much faith in a higher transcendental spiritual value. Of course, in the context of Bhagavata Purana, which I am quoting from, in God. So remember, God as depicted in this work should be clearly understood. Otherwise, people have all kinds of wrong understanding about God. God, according to Vyasa's Bhagavata Purana, which I am quoting from, is a God who is compassionate to whole creation. A God who is compassionate even towards those who do not accept Him, but who love others, who have a higher spiritual affinity with the whole creation. It is not, remember that particular word God is mentioned in the Bhagavan, such words are mentioned in these books. So frequently when we read the translation, of course no translator can give full interpretation. God has mentioned in this book is a supreme compassionate being who opens his doors and windows even to non-believers if they follow the highest spiritual truths. That's a universal Vedantic concept of God. So, to give a brief analysis of this dialogue, what Narada told Vyasa was this. See, you have discussed dharma. Dharma is only a law. Now, dharma can be interpreted in so many different ways. In the Mahabharata itself, Duryodhana is a very villain, is a great villain. Means the opposite of dharma. But he had his own arguments. If you read Mahabharata, you'll understand. Even the scourges of humanity, even the worst villains of the world, can hire a wonderful attorney and can win his case. So law itself is not a universal thing. There is something that goes beyond law. That is the life and teachings and messages of great spiritual teachers, which goes far beyond even the concept of dharma in its relative sense. Dharma in its relative sense is only a constitution that has great value. But that dharma should be preached to the accompaniment of, along with the life and teachings of great spiritual teachers who embodied in their life this dharma in its highest spiritual dimension. So Narada told him, look here, you wrote this wonderful book, but you didn't teach the average human being what they should do, what example they should follow. You did not portray an example. You did not give an example of a spiritual teacher who demonstrated these highest spiritual principles in his life. That you didn't do. When you do that, you will be giving real spiritual food to people. Otherwise, you say you should do this, you should not do that. This, if you do this, this is the good result. If you don't do this, the bad result. Like that you do. That's fine, no doubt. So even Vyasa, who did not touch upon the higher transcendental spiritual truth, with the portrayal of a great spiritual teacher whose life itself is a demonstration of the highest spiritual principles, which constitute real food for spiritual seekers. If you do that, then you will have peace of mind. Because if you portray the life of a great spiritual teacher, you are giving a practical demonstration, you are presenting a real practical demonstration of how these highest spiritual truths can be practiced in one's life. So you did not do that. Therefore, what you should do? You should write a book portraying the life and teachings of Lord Krishna. Because if you do that, reading that book, everyone will understand the royal path to God, to spiritual enlightenment, even without reading any law book. So once you do that, you will get peace of mind. So if you give to others something that helps them, it helps you. Frequently, even what you teach others doesn't help others, it helps you. Because by doing that good deed, good act of trying to teach others, you have accomplished, you have achieved, you have done something noble, and that noble act has the benefit of making your mind calm and quiet and free from anxiety. This is the great teaching that the Narada gives. So this statement, Bhavata anudita prayam yesho bhavato amalam yenai vaso na dushyeda manyeta darshanam khilam. So he says, you now, after writing all these books, now you try to write a book with elaborate descriptions of Lord Krishna's life. It itself is a great spiritual education, including his messages. Because you have not touched it. You have touched only the outer shell of spiritual life. The outer shell of spiritual life is ethics and morality. It's fine, which is the central theme of Mahabharata. Mahabharata, those of you who do not know, I just give a brief description. As I said, it's a very huge book, the shortest version, more than 100,000 verses. It's a story of two branches of the same family, fought with one another, fight each other for their property. There was a quarrel, so the sons of two brothers, younger brother and elder brother, they quarreled. It's a big Mahabharata war took place about 80 miles northwest of present Delhi. Historically, even many historians say it happened 3226 BC. That is a date given by historians. Anyhow, that's a story. So there are very wonderful characters, and there are also very shrewd, very clever characters. They have their own dharma. It's a very special feature of Mahabharata. Even a crook has his own arguments and wonderful logic. Duryodhana, Dushosana, many of the villainous characters of Mahabharata had their own arguments for their evil deeds. So frequently, what happens, people may not get a clear understanding of what they should follow, what they should do. So it's not enough to give a moralistic, ethical interpretation of life. It is equally important to give a spiritual interpretation of practical life by giving a real description of a great spiritual person, how he or she in her or his life practiced the highest spiritual values. Once you do that, you will have peace of mind, you will have your anxiety and everything gone. This is the central teaching which Narada gave. It means our intellect, our resources should be refined, should be utilized for teaching, interpreting higher spiritual principles. The most intelligent person, the most intellectual person, as I said, the most accomplished person, necessarily is not the happiest. So, your intellectual analysis, our intellectual understanding, our ability to think, all these are good, but they should be put at the service of something that goes beyond intellect, the spirit, the transcendental aspect. Otherwise, what's the difference between, say, in Christian context, let us say, a great saint who was known for his lack of scholarship, not for scholarship, but for lack of scholarship, Saint Joseph, Saint Lucipio, who was born in Cupertino, Italy. Maybe, and he was canonized in the middle of perhaps 1740 or something, 18th century. He was born as a very, very ordinary person. He was even below the level of average children of his age in intelligence or in ability. But it so happened, if you read his life, I don't have time, but if you read life, find suddenly there was a change in his life. He didn't want to join the monastery. He was forced to join the Franciscan monastery by his own mother, for whom he was a big burden to bring up such a dull young fellow who can't study anything, who failed in his school so many times. So anyway, he joined a monastery, but he was not at all interested in becoming a priest. But it so happened that he was looking after the stable, looking after the cows and sheep and all that, when bishop who was visiting that monastery happened to see this young man and had the insight to see the spiritual side of this man's personality. He could see beyond the apparent dullness or incompetence of this poor young man. And so he was asked to study for priesthood, and it so happened that the bishop commanded one of the younger priests to teach him to be his tutor. And when the examination came, the tutor failed, and St. Joseph passed the examination. You can find this all happened historical events. So sometimes you find people with some higher spiritual gifts, even devoid of any intellectual powers, reaching higher levels of spiritual enlightenment. And this man became a great saint. He was supposed to be, he was considered to be the patron saint of pilots because he could levitate, he could fly, like you find the story, flying saint. He was also the patron saint of students going for examinations, because when he himself went for an examination, the examiners asked him the only chapter, the portion of the Bible which he had memorized, nothing else. He had not read anything of the Bible. What he studied, the examiners asked. So anyway, these are examples. I'm giving in brief just examples of people who became great in spite of their lack of intellectual brightness, intellectual skills. But what about those who have intellectual skills? All our emotions and feelings and also our intellectual power should be refined, should be spiritually oriented. Otherwise, they may create more anxiety, more fear. If intellectual skills and achievements are not refined by diverting them into spiritual channels, it becomes intellectual arrogance, which makes us revolve around this wheel of doubts. That's why, those who are sincerely inquisitive will not repeat the same question, because if you answer them properly, they will understand. So real inquisitiveness will take you beyond doubt, but intellectual arrogance will keep you rotating along this wheel of doubts. You will never be able to come out of this wheel of doubts. It's like a wheel that goes on rotating. It's a wheel, you cannot come out of this wheel. On the other hand, when these intellectual skills, even inquisitiveness, even the skills of a scientist, of a great philosopher, when all these resources get a spiritual orientation, a spiritual direction, they become very helpful. They help us to grow spiritually. Otherwise, it may create more anxiety, more fear, and more doubts. So, Vyasa finally received this instruction, and then he wrote the most wonderful devotional classic in Vedantic tradition. It's called Srimad Bhagavata Purana. So there's a statement here, Na yedvaschitrapadam harerisho jagat pavitram pragnetakarhichit tadvayasam tirtha mushanti manasa na yatra kamsa niramandipa chikshaya. See, if our words, our philosophical analysis, our thought currents, and all these intellectual activities are not purified, not refined by linking them to higher spiritual goal, to God, spiritual practice, then what happens? They revolt against ourselves. You become more learned and you become more doubtful. Skepticism, agnosticism, these are some of the examples. Some of the greatest agnostics and skeptics are very intellectual, very learned, but again it's like rotating along the wheel without ever coming out of it. They will never have peace of mind. On the other hand, you find great examples of great mystics who followed a spiritual path. It gives an example of how their emotions and feelings and intellectual resources got a spiritual orientation. Examples you can find St. Augustine, St. Francis, many other examples. Augustine's conversion. He was an educated man, he was a brilliant man. When he diverted his intellectual resources, it was a spiritual channel, he became the great theologian. He's known for in Christian theological tradition. Examples can be found in very many traditions, non-spiritual traditions, which have produced great philosophers and mystics. Great philosophers and learned men and women, rotating through this wheel of skepticism and doubt and anxiety and restlessness, suddenly getting a spiritual light, which in a way becomes a beginning of a new life. It's a kind of transformation in their life. So that's a great message that Vyasa gives. All our skills, whatever they may be, intellectual skills, emotional skills, should be given a spiritual orientation. Then they help us to get out of this wheel of anxiety, skepticism, doubt, and fear. Otherwise, we keep rotating along with the wheel. It's a great message from the life of Vyasa, the author of Bhagavata Purana. So, thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om. That's it. Sri Ram Krishna. Namaste. So announcements. There will be no lecture on the next 2 Sundays, January the 31st and February the 7th. Lectures will resume on Sunday, February the 14th, when the subject will be Mahavakyas for Great Statements in Vedanta, the fundamental teachings of Vedanta philosophy. Childcare is provided during our Sunday lectures. On Wednesday evenings from 7:30 until 8:15 we have Vespers in this auditorium. On Friday evenings a special scripture class is held in Vivekananda Hall at 7:30 p.m. The topic for study is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Special announcement. On Saturday, February the 6th, we will celebrate the birthday of Swami Vivekananda with a worship in his honor at 10 o'clock in the morning. The program will also include meditation, chanting, devotional singing, readings from the life and teachings of Swami Vivekananda, flower offerings by devotees, and a prasad luncheon. Child care will be provided. On Sundays, all are welcome to use the library from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of these services. There will be no question-answer session today after this lecture. So there is no question-answer session today in the lecture. So please remember, no lecture on the next 2 Sundays, that is January 31st and February 7th. So our next lectures will resume on Sunday, February the 14th. That's all. Thank you. Namaskar.